Now, while we know economic partnerships and cooperation, these two have always been at the heart of the BRICS summit. Well, this year we know the Russia-Ukraine conflict and, of course, its economic impact globally will be pretty much the elephant in the room. So, how do you see this impacting the content of this year's talks and, of course, the targets going forward?
Well, as you say, economic partnerships, economic cooperation have been at the center, but I think politics has never been that far, and geopolitics have never been that far away. And I think, in many ways, what we don't want is for the elephant to be in the room. We want the Russia-Ukraine conflict, in a sense, to be right in the center, because it's important for this group of countries who come from very, very different perspectives in many cases to actually directly discuss not only how to resolve the crisis itself, and South Africa will come from does come from one position, India comes from another, China comes from another, and that in itself is very informative. But also how to mitigate the impacts on low and middle income countries. And I think that is a key question, because low and middle income countries need to be able to continue to grow. They need to be able to develop, even if the conflict continues and if the conflict is protracted.
Well, I think looking at the current macroeconomic picture and, of course, geopolitical issues that are currently underway, we know that a couple of issues will be on the table. We know they'll be discussing things like the dollar's dominance, sanctions, of course. We're also expecting to hear them talk about investment into the BRICS-led new development bank and, of course, an independent BRICS ratings agency, and also a new era for global development going forward. So what are some of the issues on the table you think will be particularly significant?
Well, I think the list of issues that you've set out are actually quite significant, and they're not only significant for BRICS. In fact, I'm sure you've covered this on your program, that many African countries are actually discussing the same types of mechanisms between us as well. We're talking about having an African rating agency. We're talking about how to have our own independent monetary fund. So these are the kinds of solutions. We're talking also about currency arrangements and how to streamline those. All of these kinds of mechanisms are really important to be starting to discuss. It's much needed. My firm's called Development Reimagined, because the way we need to think about these things really needs to change. It's not, we've been sitting with the same sorts of mechanisms, same international order for a very long time. And it's about time that things changed and that things evolved and modernized. So I think the BRICS looking at these areas is going to be interesting. It's going to be significant for the rest of the world, and can provide some inspiration as well.
Well, as a company that works with China and the African continent at the same time, what are you hoping to hear from BRICS this time around?
Well, I think, for instance, there is a new development bank. So far, the new development bank has really been focused on the BRICS themselves, but it has been starting to open up, starting to welcome new members. And I think a further signaling that the BRICS will not only invest in the new development bank, but also invest in expanding to others would also be very interesting and important and useful for African countries, especially at this time. We are very much constrained in terms of our spending. We're having to spend more on subsidies for food, for fuel, for healthcare. That this is all creating a lot of constraints on our economies. So having extra support from countries, from the BRICS, through organizations such as the New Development Bank, so that we can continue to invest in infrastructure, for instance, so that it doesn't get put onto the back burner for another 20 years or something, is going to be really important. And I hope the BRICS would look at that. I also think the area of climate change is going to be important. COP27 is going to be held on the African continent in Egypt. And it is Africa's COP. It's our opportunity to set the agenda. And so I'm hoping that South Africa will be making some significant points in the summit, and making sure that the BRICS position is also going to be supporting what African countries need on climate change as well.